My wife invited me to her company Christmas party with all her colleagues. Then she walked out of the bathroom with her male coworker and announced to everyone, "He's my real partner now. You're just here for appearances." Everyone laughed and agreed. I smiled, took a sip, and quietly left. 3 days later, complete company chaos. You ever walk into a situation thinking you're just showing up for free appetizers and maybe some decent wine, only to walk out with emotional trauma that'll keep your therapist's kids in private school for the next decade? Yeah, that was me on December 15th. And let me tell you, the shrimp cocktail wasn't even worth it. I'm Gavin Miles, 41 years old, former architect turned consultant, which is just a fancy way of saying I design buildings and tell other people how not to screw up their designs. I've got salt and pepper hair that makes me look distinguished instead of old, a gym membership I actually use, and up until that particular evening, I thought I had a pretty solid marriage. Emphasis on thought, because clearly I was living in the same fantasy land where people actually read terms and conditions before clicking I agree. My wife Clara, 38, worked at Arden & Company, this high-end fashion brand based right here in Nashville that sells handbags for the price of a used Honda Civic. She'd been climbing the corporate ladder there for the past 6 years, and honestly, I was proud of her. She was their VP of brand development, which meant she went to a lot of meetings where people used words like synergy and ideation without a trace of irony. When she invited me to their annual Christmas party, her tone had this weird mix of obligation and excitement, like she was presenting me to the Queen of England, but wasn't entirely sure I wouldn't embarrass her by using the wrong fork. The party was held at this pretentious downtown loft with exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling like industrial fireflies, and enough craft cocktails to make a hipster weep with joy. Everyone was dressed like they'd raided the wardrobe department of a show about wealthy people with emotional problems, which, as it turns out, was pretty accurate. I played my part perfectly, shook hands, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, complimented someone's shoes even though they looked like geometric nightmares, the whole 9 yards. Clara seemed happy, or at least she wasn't shooting me those "please don't embarrass me" looks she usually reserved for family gatherings. The night was going fine, great even, right up until it wasn't. I was standing by the bar, contemplating whether my third Manhattan was a good idea or just a necessary one, when Clara emerged from the bathroom. But she wasn't alone. She was holding hands with Eli Hart, the company's marketing manager, this 30-something guy with perfectly sculpted stubble and the kind of confidence that comes from never having experienced real consequences. They walked into the main room like they were making some kind of grand entrance, and honestly, they kind of were. Then Clara, my wife of 7 years, the woman who once cried during a commercial about rescue dogs, looked directly at me with this weird mixture of defiance and excitement and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "He's my real partner now. Gavin's just here for appearances." She said it like she was announcing a promotion, like she'd just been named Employee of the Month for most creative betrayal. The room went dead silent for maybe 2 seconds, which in social situations feels like 2 years, and then it happened. They laughed. Not that uncomfortable, nervous laughter you hear when someone tells an inappropriate joke at a funeral. I'm talking full-on, genuine, belly-aching, table-slapping, doubled-over laughter. Like she'd just told the funniest joke in the history of comedy. Someone actually spat out their drink. Another person was wiping tears from their eyes. Clara was smiling like she'd just won an Oscar, and Eli had this smug grin that made me want to introduce his face to the nearest wall. I just stood there, Manhattan in hand, watching my marriage implode in real time while being scored by a room full of strangers who apparently thought public humiliation was peak entertainment. For a second, I felt this weird out-of-body sensation, like I was watching this happen to someone else. Then reality crashed back in, and I realized something profound. I finally understood how Wi-Fi feels when someone disconnects it. 1 second you're connected, everything's working fine, and the next second you're just not. Gone. Irrelevant. Just there for show. But here's the thing, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my drink in anyone's face, even though God knows I wanted to throw it in several faces. Instead, I did something that apparently nobody expected. I smiled, raised my champagne glass like I was toasting to their happiness, and took a slow, deliberate sip. Then I set the glass down on the bar, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the exit with the kind of calm that probably made me look either incredibly mature or completely psychotic. Honestly, I was going for a mix of both. The laughter followed me out, echoing off those trendy exposed brick walls like a soundtrack to my humiliation. I could hear Clara calling after me, her voice suddenly uncertain, like maybe she'd just realized she'd made a tactical error. But I didn't turn around. I just kept walking through the loft, down the stairs, out into the December cold that hit my face like a slap from reality itself. Outside, the Nashville streets were decorated with Christmas lights that suddenly seemed way too cheerful for the occasion. The wind cut right through my suit jacket, but I barely felt it. I was too busy feeling that special combination of rage and clarity that comes from having your entire worldview shattered in the span of 30 seconds. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching my breath form clouds in the cold air, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to Mark Rutherford's name, my lawyer, my best friend since college, the guy who'd been my best man and had actually warned me that Clara's ambition might be a problem someday. I'd laughed it off back then. Funny how hindsight makes you want to punch your past self in the face. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Gavin, you okay? Isn't tonight the phase 2?" I said, cutting him off. My voice was calm, maybe too calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a Category 5 hurricane makes landfall. There was a pause, and then I heard Mark's tone shift from concern to something else. Something sharp. "Already waiting for your call, boss. I've got the paperwork ready." I hung up and stood there for another minute, watching through the loft's windows as the party continued without me. They were still laughing up there, probably already turning my humiliation into an anecdote they'd share at future parties. Remember when Clara dumped Gavin in front of everyone? Classic. What they didn't know, what Clara had apparently forgotten in her rush to publicly destroy our marriage, was that I wasn't just some accessory husband who showed up to work events and smiled for photos. 6 years ago, when Clara was trying to launch her career and needed capital to buy into Arden and Company's executive track, I'd invested $350,000 of my own money. Money I'd made from selling a commercial property design that had done exceptionally well. She'd been so grateful back then, so full of promises about how we were a team, partners in everything. Turns out, we were partners right up until she found a better offer. But here's what Clara forgot. Probably because she was too busy playing corporate rising star and apparently planning her grand betrayal. That money made me a shareholder. A quiet one, sure, but a shareholder nonetheless. And while she'd been working late for the past year, which I now understood meant something very different than I'd thought, I'd been doing something too. I'd been buying more shares. Quietly, carefully, through shell corporations and legal structures that Mark had helped me set up. Not because I suspected anything, but because I'm an architect turned consultant, and we plan for structural integrity. We think long-term. We build foundations that last. As I walked to my car, I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite peace, but something close to it. Purpose, maybe. Clarity. The kind of focus you get when someone hands you a blueprint for revenge, and all you have to do is follow the lines. I got in my car, turned on the heat, and checked my phone. 27 text messages, all from Clara. I scrolled through them without opening any. It was a misunderstanding. "You embarrassed me by leaving. Gavin, can we please talk? You're overreacting. Everyone thinks you're being dramatic." I deleted every single one without responding, started the engine, and drove home through streets decorated with lights that suddenly seemed a little brighter, a little more promising. When I got home, I poured myself a whiskey, the good stuff, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat down with my cat, Whiskers, who gave me the same pitying look she probably reserved for the mice she occasionally left on the doorstep. "Don't look at me like that," I told her. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." And weirdly enough, I meant it. Because sometimes, the worst night of your life is just the opening act to something so much better. You just have to be patient enough to wait for the curtain to rise on Act 2. When I got home that night, I made a conscious decision to pour whiskey instead of emotions, which I thought showed remarkable restraint considering the circumstances. I sat in my leather armchair, the one Clara always said looked too masculine for the living room, but I kept anyway, because sometimes a man needs a chair that understands him, and just stared at the wall for a solid 10 minutes. Whiskers jumped into my lap, kneaded my thigh with her claws like she was tenderizing meat, and settled in with a purr that sounded almost sympathetic. Even my cat felt bad for me, which was either touching or pathetic, and I wasn't ready to decide which. Here's the thing nobody tells you about getting publicly humiliated by your spouse. You don't immediately crumble into a sobbing mess like they show in movies. At least, I didn't. Instead, I felt this weird sense of clarity, like someone had just handed me a puzzle and I could finally see how all the pieces fit together. All those late nights at the office, all those team-building weekends, all those times she'd come home smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine. It all made sense now. I wasn't heartbroken so much as deeply, profoundly amused by how confidently stupid people can be when they think they're getting away with something. Clara didn't just cheat on me. No, that would have been too simple, too pedestrian. She turned it into a full production, complete with a public announcement and an audience that apparently thought betrayal was the height of entertainment. She made it a PowerPoint presentation with visual aids and a Q&A session. I almost had to respect the audacity of it, except that I was the one getting screwed, and not in the fun way. My phone buzzed again. Text number 32 from Clara, if anyone was counting, and I absolutely was. I ignored it and called Mark instead. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he'd been waiting for me to call back. How you holding up? He asked, and I could hear the concern in his voice mixed with something else. Anticipation, maybe. Mark had been my friend long enough to know that I didn't get mad the way normal people got mad. I got methodical. I'm great, I said, taking a sip of whiskey that burned in the best possible way. Really, truly fantastic. I just watched my wife hold hands with her coworker and announce to a room full of strangers that I'm basically a Ken doll she keeps around for decoration, and honestly, I've never felt more focused in my entire life. That's the spirit, Mark said, and I could hear him shuffling papers on his end. So, let's talk about what you actually own, shall we? Because I've got the documentation right here, and buddy, it's even better than we thought. This is where the story gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean where karma decides to suit up and enter the game wearing steel-toed boots. See, 6 years ago, when Clara was still pretending to be madly in love with me, and not just madly in love with the idea of corporate success, she'd come to me with this opportunity. Arden and Company was expanding, and they were offering executive positions to people who could bring capital investment to the table. Clara was brilliant at her job, I'll give her that, but she didn't have the cash to buy in at the level she wanted. That's where I came in, the supportive husband with money from a successful commercial property design that had earned me more than I'd expected. I gave her $350,000. Not as a gift, mind you, but as an investment. We'd structured it properly, with Mark's help, because even back then I believed in protecting assets. That money bought shares in the company, made me a shareholder, gave me a seat at the table even if I never chose to sit in it. Clara knew this, obviously. She'd signed the paperwork. She'd thanked me probably 1,000 times. But here's the thing about people who get successful. They start to forget where they came from. They start to rewrite history in their heads until they're the hero of their own story, and everyone else is just a supporting character. Clara forgot that I was a shareholder. Or maybe she just stopped thinking it mattered because I'd never exercised any of my rights as one. I'd been the silent partner, the supportive husband who showed up to events and smiled for photos and never made waves. But while she'd been working late with Eli, and now I couldn't even think about what that meant without wanting to disinfect my entire house, I'd been doing some work of my own. Talk to me about the shell corporations, I said to Mark, and I heard him chuckle on the other end. You're going to love this, he said. Over the past 18 months, through the 3 LLCs we set up, you've been quietly buying shares whenever they became available. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger attention, but consistent. And with the shares you already owned from the initial investment, plus everything we've acquired since. He paused for dramatic effect, and I could practically hear his grin through the phone. You now own 52% of Arden and Company. I sat up so fast that Whiskers made an indignant noise and jumped off my lap. Say that again. 52%, Gavin. You're the majority shareholder. You own the company. Well, the controlling interest in it, anyway. Clara works for you now. Eli works for you. Everyone who laughed at you tonight works for you. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It started as a chuckle and built into full-blown laughter that probably would have concerned Whiskers if she wasn't already concerned about me disturbing her sleep schedule. The irony was just too perfect, too absolutely beautiful to not appreciate. Clara had thrown away our marriage for a guy who worked at a company I now effectively owned. She'd humiliated me in front of people who were technically my employees. She'd made the tactical error of the century, and she didn't even know it yet. Mark, I said when I could finally speak again, I need you to prepare documentation for a board meeting Monday morning, and I need it to be airtight, because what I'm about to do is going to make tonight's party look like a warm-up act. Already on it, he said. I'll have everything ready by Sunday night. But Gavin, are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. This is going to be nuclear. Nuclear, I said, taking another sip of whiskey and feeling it warm my chest. Mark, nuclear is what Clara did to our marriage in front of 50 people who thought it was hilarious. What I'm about to do is just business, just restructuring, just a majority shareholder exercising his rights to improve company performance. You're terrifying when you're calm like this, Mark said, but he sounded proud. I know, I said. It's one of my best qualities. After we hung up, I sat there for another hour, just thinking. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Clara, each one more desperate than the last. I scrolled through them without opening any, reading the preview text that appeared on my screen. Gavin, please, we need to talk. I know you're upset, but you're being childish. Eli and I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Can you at least acknowledge that you received these messages? You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. Everyone is asking me where you went. You embarrassed me by leaving like that. That last one made me laugh out loud. I embarrassed her. I wasn't the one who decided to announce an affair at a Christmas party like it was a gender reveal. But that was Clara for you. Always able to make herself the victim. Always able to twist the narrative until she came out looking sympathetic. It had worked on me for 7 years, but apparently, my subscription to her particular brand of manipulation had just expired. I thought about responding. I really did. I had about 15 different replies typed out and deleted, each one more sarcastic than the last. But then I realized something. Silence was more powerful than anything I could say right now. Silence would drive her crazy. Silence would make her wonder what I was thinking, what I was planning, whether I was okay or falling apart. And while she was wondering, I'd be preparing. Instead of texting her back, I did something that probably qualified as petty but felt absolutely necessary for my mental health. I ordered flowers to be delivered to her office the next day. Not roses, those were too romantic. Not lilies, those were for funerals, and I wasn't quite that dark yet. No, I ordered black tulips, which apparently exist and symbolize farewell and rebirth. According to the florist's website, I spent 20 minutes browsing. I had them include a note in my handwriting that said simply, "Congratulations on your new partner. See you Monday." Short, professional, with just enough ambiguity to make her paranoid about what Monday might bring. Perfect. I finished my whiskey, gave Whiskers fresh food because at least one of us deserved to have a good night, and went to bed. I expected to lie awake all night, replaying the party scene over and over, but instead I fell asleep almost immediately. Turns out, having a plan is better than Ambien. When I woke up Saturday morning, I had 43 texts from Clara, 6 missed calls, and a voicemail that I deleted without listening to. I also had a text from Mark with a simple message. The paperwork is beautiful. You're going to destroy her. I smiled, made coffee, and started preparing for Monday. Because if Clara wanted to play games with my life, that was fine. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was an architect. I built things. I planned things. I made sure the foundation was solid before I ever started construction. And the foundation I'd built was about to bring her whole world crashing down. Saturday morning hit different when you're planning corporate warfare over your breakfast cereal. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, scrolling through my phone and eating Lucky Charms like a responsible adult, when I saw it. Clara had posted on Instagram. At 7 in the morning. On a Saturday. The woman who usually didn't wake up before 9 on weekends had apparently been up early enough to curate her public humiliation of me into social media content. The photo was one of those annoyingly perfect couple shots. Clara and Eli sitting in some trendy coffee shop with exposed brick walls, because of course, their hands intertwined on the table between 2 artisanal lattes that probably cost more than my lunch. They were both smiling like they'd just discovered the cure for cancer instead of basic infidelity. The caption read, "Real love starts when you stop pretending. Sparkles 2 hearts #authentic life #new beginnings #love wins." I stared at my phone for a solid 30 seconds, a Lucky Charms marshmallow halfway to my mouth, trying to process the sheer audacity of what I was looking at. Real love starts when you stop pretending. Lady, you still pretend to like kale. I've seen you spit it into napkins when you think nobody's watching. You pretend to enjoy jogging. You pretend your natural hair color isn't 3 shades darker than what you show the world. Your entire life is a performance. And now you're posting inspirational quotes about authenticity like you're some kind of relationship guru instead of someone who just blew up a 7-year marriage for a guy whose entire personality is based on owning a vintage motorcycle. I took a screenshot because documentation is important and forwarded it to Mark with a simple message. Evidence exhibit for the character assassination she's doing to herself. He texted back immediately, which meant he was already awake and probably working on Monday's presentation. Perfect. Let the audience build. The higher she climbs on that moral high ground, the further she has to fall. Also, did she really use 3 hashtags about love? That's not confidence. That's overcompensation. Mark got it. This was why we've been friends since college. The man understood psychology and legal strategy in equal measure, which made him either the perfect lawyer or a future supervillain. Possibly both. I spent the rest of Saturday doing something that probably would have concerned a therapist. I went through Clara's entire social media presence for the past year. Every post, every comment, every tagged photo. I wasn't looking for evidence of the affair. That ship had sailed, crashed into an iceberg, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. No, I was looking for patterns. For the narrative she'd been building. For the story she'd been telling herself and everyone else about who we were as a couple. What I found was fascinating in the most depressing way possible. 6 months ago, her posts about us had started to shift. Where she used to post couple photos with captions about partnership and teamwork, she'd started posting solo shots with captions about finding yourself and growth and not settling for comfortable. 3 months ago, the posts about me stopped entirely. It was like I'd been erased from her digital life long before she'd decided to erase me from her actual one. Meanwhile, Eli had started appearing in the background of her work photos, always just slightly too close to be professional, always with that same smug smile that made me want to introduce his face to a wall. The comments on her new post were rolling in fast. Most of them were supportive in that shallow social media way where people leave heart emojis and you go girl, without actually knowing what they're supporting. But there were a few that caught my attention. Wait, wasn't she married? This is messy lol. I feel bad for her husband tbh. Homegirl really aired out her marriage on Instagram? Bold strategy. At least some people had functioning brain cells and a sense of social decorum. I screenshotted those too because why not? At this point, I was basically building a digital scrapbook of my wife's public meltdown, and honestly, it was more entertaining than anything on Netflix. Around noon, I met up with Stella Brooks, my financial analyst. Stella was one of those terrifyingly competent people who made you feel like you weren't using your life efficiently enough. She was 34, always dressed like she was about to close a deal that would make the Forbes list, and had the kind of analytical mind that could spot financial patterns in data the way some people could spot shapes in clouds. Mark had recommended her 18 months ago when I'd first started thinking about expanding my investment portfolio, and she'd been instrumental in helping me quietly acquire shares in Arden & Company without triggering any red flags. We met at a coffee shop, ironically, the same chain where Clara and Eli had taken their Instagram photo, though different location. I ordered a black coffee because I was too tired for pretentious drink orders, and Stella got something with 4 different specifications that the barista had to write down. So, she said, opening her laptop before we'd even sat down, I've been running the numbers all morning, and Gavin, you're going to love this. She turned the screen toward me, showing a spreadsheet that looked like it had been designed by someone who dreamed in Excel formulas. Between your initial investment, the shares you've acquired through the shell corporations, and the stocks that came available last month when Peterson retired from the board, you now own 52.3% of Arden & Company. 0.3, I said. That 0.3 feels important. It is, Stella said, smiling in that way that meant she'd found something particularly interesting in the data. It means that even if Clara somehow convinced every other shareholder to vote against you, which she won't because most of them don't even know who you are, you still have absolute controlling interest. You're not just the majority shareholder, Gavin. You're untouchable. I sat back in my chair and let that sink in. Untouchable. Funny how 24 hours ago, I'd felt like the most touchable person in the world, touched by humiliation, touched by betrayal, touched by the laughter of 50 people who thought my pain was hilarious. Now I was untouchable. The irony was so perfect it almost felt scripted. What about her position? I asked. VP of Brand Development. What kind of authority does that give her? Stella pulled up another document. She reports directly to the CEO, has budgetary authority up to $50,000 per project, and sits on the executive committee. However, all of that is contingent on board approval, and the board answers to the majority shareholder, which is you. So technically, you could remove her from her position with a simple board vote. Could, I said. But will I? That's above my pay grade, Stella said, though her smile suggested she knew exactly what I was planning. I'm just here to tell you that financially and legally, you have every right to restructure the company however you see fit. If you decide that restructuring includes removing executives who, say, violate company ethics policies or create hostile work environments, that's entirely within your purview as majority shareholder. I loved the way Stella talked. Everything was clinical, professional, completely divorced from emotion, even though we both knew exactly what we were discussing. She wasn't saying, you can fire your cheating wife. She was saying, you can remove executives who violate company policy. Same outcome, completely different optics. We spent the next hour going over every detail of Monday's plan. Stella had prepared financial reports, performance metrics, and company projections that would make it clear to everyone in that boardroom that I wasn't making decisions based on personal vendetta. I was making decisions based on what was best for the company. The fact that what was best for the company happened to align perfectly with what was best for my revenge was just a happy coincidence. One more thing, Stella said as we were packing up. You should know that rumors are already circulating at Arden and Company about what happened at the party. Social media moves fast, and apparently, several people who were there posted about it. Nothing explicit, just vague posts about drama, and didn't see that coming. But enough that people are talking. Good, I said. Let them talk. By Monday morning, they'll have a lot more to talk about. When I got home that evening, my phone showed 67 unread texts from Clara. 67. The woman had apparently decided that the best response to me ignoring her was to simply send more messages, like I was a vending machine that would eventually give her what she wanted if she just kept pressing buttons. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I confirmed the flower delivery for Monday morning, black tulips, arriving at 9 a.m., an hour before the board meeting. I'd specified that they be delivered to her office with the note displayed prominently, because subtle was for people who weren't trying to make a point. The note read, "Congratulations on your new partner. See you Monday." Short, professional, and with just enough ominous undertone to make her spend the entire weekend wondering what the hell I meant by "see you Monday." Was I coming to beg for her back? Was I coming to cause a scene? Was I coming to finally have the conversation she claimed she wanted? She'd spend all weekend guessing, and she'd be wrong on every count. Sunday was quiet. I worked out, went for a run, meal prepped for the week like a responsible adult who definitely wasn't planning to destroy his wife's career in less than 24 hours. Mark sent me the final documentation around 8 p.m. Everything was perfect, every legal I dotted and corporate T crossed. Stella sent her reports an hour later. Everything was ready. I laid out my best suit, charcoal gray, the one that made me look like I could foreclose on your house and feel nothing about it. I picked out a tie that Clara had once said made me look too intimidating for casual events. Perfect. I wasn't going to a casual event. I was going to war, and I was going to look damn good doing it. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Maybe years. Because tomorrow, the people who'd laughed at me were going to learn a very important lesson. Never humiliate someone who holds your professional life in their hands. And definitely never do it at a party where someone can take video evidence of you being terrible humans. Tomorrow was going to be spectacular. Monday morning, I woke up at 5:30 with the kind of clarity usually reserved for people who found religion or survived near-death experiences. I felt good. Better than good, actually. I felt like I'd finally figured out the cheat code to a game I'd been losing without realizing I was playing. I went for a run, came back, showered, and stood in front of my closet picking out armor for battle. Except my armor was a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Eli's monthly rent. This wasn't just any suit. This was the suit I wore when I needed to close deals, the one that made me look like I could buy your company before lunch and still have time for a relaxed afternoon meeting. I paired it with a crisp white shirt, a dark blue tie that Clara once said made me look too intimidating for casual events, and cufflinks my grandfather had given me that had actual weight to them. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked like a man who forgave nothing but looked absolutely amazing while holding grudges. The drive to Arden and Company's office building should have made me nervous. It didn't. I had the radio on some classic rock station, singing along to songs about rebellion and freedom like I was the protagonist in a movie about corporate revenge. Which, to be fair, I kind of was. Every red light felt like the universe giving me time to mentally prepare for what was about to happen. Every green light felt like permission to proceed with the plan. I arrived at 8:45, early enough to make a statement, but not so early that it looked desperate. The building was one of those modern glass structures that reflected the sky and made you feel small when you walked in, which I'm sure was intentional. The lobby had that new money smell, expensive coffee, designer perfume, and the faint scent of people trying too hard to appear successful. I nodded at the security guard, who looked at me with confusion because I'd never actually been to Clara's office before despite being married to her for 7 years. That probably should have told me something about our relationship, but hindsight is 20/20 and also a smug jerk. I took the elevator to the 7th floor, where the executive offices lived in their climate-controlled luxury. The doors opened, and I stepped out into a hallway that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd watched too many shows about powerful people having affairs in corner offices. Everything was white and chrome and glass, sterile in a way that probably cost a fortune to achieve. The receptionist, a young woman with glasses and an expression that said she'd seen some things working here, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" "Gavin Miles," I said. "I'm here for the board meeting." Her eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Miles." "Yes. They're expecting you." "Conference room B, down the hall, and to the left." "Thank you," I said, and walked past her desk with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're about to ruin someone's day in the most legal way possible. The office was already buzzing with that Monday morning energy. People carrying coffee, having conversations about their weekends, completely unaware that they were about to witness corporate history. I passed Clara's office on the way to the conference room. The door was closed, but through the glass wall, I could see the black tulip-side scent sitting on her desk in a vase. She was standing next to them, staring at the card with an expression that looked somewhere between confused and panicked. Good. Let her panic. She'd earned it. Conference room B was exactly what you'd expect from a company that charged $500 for a handbag, minimalist furniture, a table that could seat 20 people but probably cost more than a car, and a massive screen on the wall for presentations. Mark was already there, setting up his laptop, wearing his own version of the power suit. When he saw me, he grinned like a kid on Christmas morning. "You ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready since Friday night," I said. "Let's burn this place down." "Figuratively," he said. "Let's figuratively burn it down." "I have to say that as your lawyer." "Figuratively." I agreed, though we both knew what I meant. The board members started filing in around 9:50. There were 7 of them, various executives and investors who'd bought into Arden and Company over the years. I recognized a few faces from the Christmas party, people who'd been laughing when Clara made her announcement. They looked at me with expressions ranging from confusion to concern, probably wondering why the humiliated husband was crashing their Monday morning meeting. Then Clara walked in with Eli, and the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. She froze when she saw me, her face going through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds: surprise, confusion, anger, fear, and finally settling on this weird fake confidence that didn't reach her eyes. Eli just looked uncomfortable, like he'd shown up to a party and realized he was the only one in costume. "Gavin," Clara said, her voice doing that thing where she tried to sound casual but came across as defensive. "What are you doing here?" I smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile a shark probably makes before it bites. "I'm here for the meeting. Please, everyone, have a seat." "You can't just," Clara started, but Tara Morrison, the CFO, cut her off. "Actually, Clara, he can." Tara was looking at her tablet, her expression shifting from professional confusion to professional concern. "According to the shareholder registry, Gavin Miles is listed as, oh my what?" Clara said, still standing, her hand gripping the back of a chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Perhaps we should start the meeting, I said pleasantly, taking a seat at the head of the table like I owned the place. Because I did. Mark, would you like to present? Mark opened his laptop and the screen behind me lit up with the title slide, Arden and Company, Shareholder Structure and Proposed Organizational Changes. He was enjoying this way too much, but honestly, so was I. As of this morning, Mark began, pulling up the first chart. The shareholder breakdown of Arden and Company is as follows. He clicked, and a pie chart appeared showing ownership percentages. My name sat at the top with 52.3% in bold letters that might as well have been in neon. Gavin Miles is the majority shareholder and controlling interest in this company. The room went silent. Not the kind of silence where people are being polite, but the kind where everyone's brain is trying to process information that doesn't make sense. Clara's face had gone from confused to pale to something that looked like she'd just watched her entire life flash before her eyes and realized she'd made a terrible, irreversible mistake. "That's not possible," she said, but her voice had lost all its confidence. "I would know if you did know," I said, leaning back in my chair with the kind of casual authority that comes from holding all the cards. 6 years ago, I invested $350,000 in this company to help fund your executive position. That investment made me a shareholder. Over the past 18 months, I've been quietly acquiring additional shares through legal means. Everything is documented, everything is legitimate, and everything is now a matter of public record. Eli had the good sense to look like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Clara looked like she was going to either cry or throw something, and I genuinely wasn't sure which I was hoping for. "Why?" she asked, and for the first time since Friday night, I saw actual emotion on her face instead of that practiced corporate mask. "Why did I invest in your company?" I said. "Because I believed in you." "Why did I continue investing?" "Because I believe in protecting my assets." "Why am I here now?" I leaned forward, dropping the casual act. "Because you humiliated me in front of 50 people, announced your affair like it was a corporate achievement, and apparently forgot that actions have consequences." Tara cleared her throat. "So what exactly are you proposing, Mr. Miles?" I nodded at Mark, who pulled up the next slide. "I'm proposing several organizational changes that I believe will improve company performance and address certain ethical concerns. First, I'd like to open a formal investigation into any relationships between employees that may violate company policy regarding workplace conduct." Eli's face went from uncomfortable to absolutely terrified. Apparently, having an affair with your boss's wife was bad enough, but having an affair with an employee when you're in management was a fireable offense. Who knew? Oh right, everyone knew. That's literally in every employee handbook ever written. Second, I continued, I'm proposing the immediate removal of Clara Miles from her position as VP of Brand Development, effective today, pending the results of the investigation into workplace ethics violations. "You can't do this," Clara said, but there was no strength behind it. She knew I could. She was just hoping I wouldn't. "I can, actually," I said. "I'm the majority shareholder. I have the authority to propose restructuring, and the board has the authority to vote on it. So let's vote. All in favor of opening an ethics investigation?" Hands went up around the table. Not immediately, but one by one. Board members raised their hands because they knew which way the wind was blowing. When you're the majority shareholder, people tend to agree with you unless they want to find themselves out of a job. And all in favor of removing Clara Miles from her executive position pending investigation results? More hands. Clara's face had gone from pale to red, tears forming in her eyes, but not quite falling because she was still trying to maintain some shred of dignity in front of her colleagues. "Motion passes," I said calmly. "Clara, you'll need to clear out your office by end of business today. HR will be in touch regarding your severance package, which will be, I assure you, exactly what your contract stipulates and not a penny more." The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Board members asking questions, Mark providing documentation, Tara looking at her tablet like it held the answers to life's mysteries. Clara stood there for a moment, looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time, and then she walked out without a word. Eli followed her, probably to offer comfort or excuses or whatever it is that homewreckers offer when the home they wreck collapses on top of them. I sat there at the head of the table, in my perfect suit, feeling like I'd just won a game I didn't even know I was playing until someone changed all the rules. The room smelled like expensive coffee and the faint scent of burning bridges, and honestly, it smelled like victory. You know how they say news travels fast? That's a lie. News doesn't travel fast, it teleports. It quantum leaps across space and time. It moves at speeds that would make physicists weep and reconsider everything they thought they knew about the universe. By the time I left that boardroom at 10:30 on Monday morning, the entire 7th floor knew what had happened. By 11, the whole building knew. By noon, Clara holding Eli's hand, her announcement about me being just for appearances, the room's laughter, and most importantly, my face. My perfectly calm, eerily composed face as I raised my champagne glass, took a sip, and walked out without a word. The comments section was absolutely losing its mind. This man's face says, "I'm about to ruin your whole career, Skull." The calm ones are always the most dangerous. "She's gonna regret this so hard, LMYOLO." My man didn't even flinch. King behavior. Plot twist. He owns the company. Calling it now. That last comment had been posted 2 days ago, and someone had replied this morning. Update. He does own the company. He fired her today. I work there. Yeah, I said to the woman. That's me. Dude, she said, and I appreciated that she went with dude instead of something more formal. You're like a legend right now. What you did this morning is all over Twitter. Someone leaked the boardroom meeting. Of course someone had leaked it. You can't have that kind of drama without someone recording it on their phone under the table or remembering enough details to post a play-by-play thread. I thanked her, ordered my sandwich, turkey, because I was feeling traditional, and sat down to scroll through my phone while I ate. Twitter was an absolute dumpster fire, which meant it was also absolutely entertaining. Someone had created a hashtag #SilentSavageHusband. It was trending. Number 3 in the United States, right below some political scandal and above a celebrity pregnancy announcement. I'd somehow become a meme, a cautionary tale, and a folk hero all at the same time. The tweets were golden. This man waited 3 days to destroy her. That's not revenge, that's strategic warfare. She really cheated on him, announced it publicly, and forgot he owned the company? That's not just stupid, that's Olympic-level stupid. Imagine laughing at someone on Friday and getting fired by them on Monday. Couldn't be me. The way he just smiled and left the party. Cinema. Pure cinema. There were also, predictably, people who thought I was a monster. Using your financial power to punish your wife for leaving you is abusive, one tweet read. Another said, "This is why we need to dismantle capitalism. Rich men weaponizing ownership against women." I wanted to reply and point out that Clara had cheated, humiliated me publicly, and violated company ethics policies, but Mark had already texted me. Do not engage with social media. Let them talk. Your silence is more powerful. He was right, of course. He was annoyingly right about most things, which is why I paid him a stupid amount of money to be my lawyer. Around 2 o'clock, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Miles? This is Jennifer Park from Channel 5 News. We're doing a story about what happened at Arden and Company this morning, and we'd love to get your perspective." A news story. Fantastic. My marriage implosion had gone from social media gossip to actual journalism. "I'm going to have to decline," I said. "This is a private matter." "But sir, the story is already public." The video from Friday night has millions of views, and reports of this morning's board meeting are all over social media. Don't you want to share your side? I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "Sure," I said. "Here's my side. I came, I invested, I reclaimed. Merry Christmas." I hung up before she could ask follow-up questions, but apparently that was enough because by 4 o'clock, that quote was everywhere. Someone had turned it into a graphic with my face photoshopped onto various victorious historical figures. Napoleon, Rocky Balboa, that famous photo of Muhammad Ali standing over his opponent. The internet was having way too much fun with my personal tragedy. Meanwhile, back at Arden and Company, things were apparently descending into absolute chaos. I knew this because Tara called me at 3:30, her voice strained in a way that suggested she'd been dealing with crisis management for hours. "Gavin, we need to talk about the situation here," she said. "What situation?" I asked innocently, though I knew exactly what situation. "The building is surrounded by reporters. Our customer service line is being flooded with calls, some people supporting Clara, some people supporting you, all of them asking for statements. 3 employees have already quit because they can't work in this environment. The company Instagram is getting bombarded with comments on every single post, including ads from 2 years ago. And Clara is in her office refusing to pack up her things until you agree to speak with her. Tell her she has until 5 o'clock, or security will pack them for her, I said calmly. As for the reporters, release a statement saying that Arden and Company takes workplace ethics seriously and is conducting a thorough investigation. As for the employees who quit, good riddance. Anyone who quits over workplace policy enforcement probably wasn't a great employee anyway. Gavin, Tara said, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. I've worked here for 8 years. I've never seen anything like this. Neither have I said. But here we are. How are sales? There was a pause. Actually up. Way up. Apparently, publicity, even messy publicity, sells handbags. Our website traffic is up 400%. I laughed. I couldn't help it. So what you're telling me is that my marriage falling apart is good for business? I mean, I wouldn't phrase it like that in a board meeting, but yes. People love drama, and they love it even more when they can participate by buying things. Capitalism is wild, I said. Keep me updated on the numbers. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, I was back home with Whiskers, watching the news coverage of my own life like it was a reality show I hadn't auditioned for. Channel 5 had indeed run the story, complete with my I came, I invested, I reclaimed quote displayed in bold letters over footage of the Arden and Company building. They'd interviewed random people on the street, asking them what they thought about the situation. I think he's justified, one woman said. She humiliated him publicly. He responded professionally. I think they're both messy, a college-aged guy said. But like, entertaining messy. I'd watch this show. This is why I'm never getting married. A third person contributed helpfully. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all suddenly interested in my well-being now that I was internet famous. Old college friends, distant cousins, my barber, the guy who sold me my car 3 years ago. Everyone wanted to offer support or get the inside scoop or just let me know they'd seen the videos. The only person who hadn't contacted me was Clara. Well, she'd tried 43 calls in the past 6 hours, but I hadn't answered any of them. What was there to say? She'd made her choice on Friday night. I'd made mine on Monday morning. Everything else was just noise. Around 7, Mark sent me a text with a link to a Twitter thread. Someone had done a deep dive into the entire situation, pulling together the Friday night video, reports from the Monday board meeting, analysis of company ownership structures, and screenshots of Clara's Instagram post. It read like investigative journalism meets gossip column, and it had been retweeted 50,000 times. The thread ended with, moral of the story, don't humiliate someone who signs your checks. Also, maybe don't announce your affair at a work party. Just a thought. I texted Mark back. Should I be worried about this level of attention? He replied immediately, worried? Dude, you're trending above a Kardashian. This is the best free publicity you could ask for. Just don't do anything stupid, don't talk to reporters without me present, and for the love of God, stay off Twitter. Sound advice, which I immediately ignored by creating a burner Twitter account just to scroll through the hashtag. I wasn't going to engage, but I was definitely going to watch the internet collectively lose its mind over my life. One tweet caught my attention. This man really said, you want a divorce? Cool, you're fired too, and honestly? Iconic. I wasn't sure if I'd ever wanted a divorce, honestly. I'd been pretty happy in my marriage right up until it exploded in my face. But if Clara wanted to rewrite our history as her finally being authentic and finding real love, then fine. I could rewrite history too. Mine just came with better documentation and controlling shares in a multi-million-dollar company. My phone buzzed again, another call from Clara. I declined it and turned on Do Not Disturb. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new drama, probably new viral videos. But tonight I was going to finish my whiskey, watch Whiskers chase a toy mouse around the living room, and enjoy the fact that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. Or at least the guys who read their investment contracts carefully. 3 days after the boardroom apocalypse, Arden and Company was experiencing what business analysts would politely call organizational turbulence, and what everyone else would call a complete dumpster fire with excellent lighting. I knew this because Tara had started calling me at increasingly desperate intervals, and each call painted a picture of corporate chaos that would have been concerning if it wasn't also deeply, deeply satisfying. The suppliers are freezing contracts, she told me on Wednesday morning, her voice tight with stress. Apparently, they're concerned about the company's stability given all the negative publicity. What negative publicity? I asked, genuinely curious. Sales are up, aren't they? Yes, but publicity and stability are different things. When your VP gets fired for having an affair that went viral, suppliers start wondering if their invoices will get paid. She had a point. Tell them the company is under new management direction and all existing contracts will be honored. Send them documentation of our cash reserves. Show them we're more stable now than we were a week ago. Are we? Tara asked, and I could hear the genuine question underneath the professional tone. Absolutely, I said. We just removed the people who were creating workplace drama and violating ethics policies. That's not instability. That's course correction. The suppliers weren't the only ones panicking. By Thursday, Tara called again with a new crisis. Investors were requesting emergency meetings. Apparently, 3 of the smaller shareholders wanted to discuss the direction of the company and leadership concerns, which was corporate speak for, "We're nervous about the guy who just fired his wife, and we want to make sure he's not going to tank our investment." I agreed to meet with them Friday afternoon, mostly because watching people squirm while trying to be professionally polite was becoming my new favorite hobby. The meeting was held in the same conference room where I'd dropped the ownership bomb on Monday, which felt appropriate. Full circle, poetic justice, all that good stuff. The 3 investors, 2 men in their 50s and a woman in her 40s, all wearing variations of expensive business casual, sat across from me with expressions that tried to project confidence, but mostly projected concern. One of them, a guy named Richard who apparently owned 6% of the company, cleared his throat and launched into what was clearly a prepared speech. Mr. Miles, we want to start by saying we respect your authority as majority shareholder, but we have some concerns about the recent events. Events, I repeated. You mean me firing my wife for violating company ethics policies? Well, when you put it that way, how else would I put it? I asked. She had an affair with a direct report, announced it at a company function, and created a hostile work environment. Would you prefer I kept her on staff so she could continue violating HR policies? The woman, whose name was Patricia, jumped in. We're more concerned about the publicity, the viral videos, the media coverage, the social media attention. It's a lot of exposure for a company that typically maintains a low profile. True, I acknowledged. But have you seen the sales numbers? We're up 42% this week. Our website crashed twice from traffic. 3 influencers have organically posted about our products without being paid because they want to be associated with the drama. We've gotten more brand awareness in 4 days than we got in the past 2 years of marketing campaigns. Richard shifted uncomfortably. But what happens when the attention dies down? What's the long-term strategy? I leaned back in my chair, the same chair where I'd sat 4 days ago watching Clara's world crumble. The long-term strategy is the same as it always was. Make quality products, maintain ethical workplace standards, and grow the business. The only thing that's changed is that we now have a much larger audience aware we exist. That's not a problem. That's an opportunity. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes of them asking politely concerned questions and me providing calm, rational answers that made it clear I knew exactly what I was doing. By the end, they seemed mollified, or at least resigned to the fact that I wasn't going anywhere and neither was my controlling interest in the company. But the real chaos wasn't coming from suppliers or investors, it was coming from HR. By Friday afternoon, I'd received a report that made me laugh out loud in my home office, startling Whiskers from her nap. The HR department had received 14 resignation letters in 4 days. 14. In a company of 87 employees, that was significant. I called Tara. Tell me about these resignations. Most of them are citing uncomfortable work environment or concerns about company direction, she said. A few are from Clara's team, which isn't surprising. 2 are from marketing, which is Eli's department. And 3 are from people who apparently just don't like drama and decided this was too much. The vibe was off, I said, remembering what she'd mentioned earlier. Exactly. The vibe was off. Good, I said, and I could hear her surprise through the phone. Good. Tara, think about it. The people who are quitting are either loyal to Clara, complicit in the ethics violations, or the kind of people who prioritize vibes over workplace professionalism. Those aren't people we want representing the company anyway. Let them go, post the job openings, and I guarantee we'll get better applicants who actually want to work somewhere with clear ethical standards. There was a pause. You know what? That actually makes sense. I'm occasionally wise, I said. Don't spread it around. The Real kicker came on Saturday, when Eli officially resigned. Not just from Arden and Company, but apparently from Nashville's corporate scene entirely. According to the resignation letter that somehow got leaked to me. Thank you, anonymous employee who clearly disliked him. He was pursuing personal growth opportunities and taking time to reflect on his values. Translation: he'd been fired from every job he applied to because nobody wants to hire the guy from the viral affair video. Turns out, being famous for workplace misconduct isn't actually great for your career prospects. Who knew? I heard through the corporate gossip chain, which moved faster than any official communication ever could, that he'd taken a job at a smoothie bar in East Nashville. Not managing the smoothie bar, working at the smoothie bar, making smoothies for people who probably recognized him from the videos and gave him pitying looks while ordering their acai bowls. The irony was almost too perfect. The guy who'd helped destroy my marriage was now blending kale and bananas for minimum wage plus tips, probably wondering where exactly his life had gone wrong. I would have felt bad for him if he hadn't literally participated in publicly humiliating me, but my sympathy reserves were currently running it empty. Clara, meanwhile, had gone completely silent. No more Instagram posts, no more texts, no more calls. Her social media accounts had gone private, and according to people who still followed her, she hadn't posted anything since Monday. The woman who'd announced her affair like it was a promotional campaign had apparently discovered the value of shutting up, which was probably the first smart decision she'd made in months. As I sat in my home office on Saturday evening, reviewing the financial reports that showed Arden and Company posting record profits despite, or perhaps because of, the chaos, I realized something funny. Clara's grand gesture of authenticity, her public declaration of Real love, her dramatic announcement that I was just for appearances, it had all backfired spectacularly. She'd wanted to be free, to be authentic, to start fresh with Eli. Instead, she'd lost her job, her reputation, and her relationship with the guy she'd thrown everything away for. Meanwhile, I'd gained control of a profitable company, become an internet folk hero, and discovered that revenge didn't have to be loud to be effective. Sometimes it just had to be patient. I should have seen the lawsuit coming. Actually, scratch that, I did see it coming. Mark had predicted it within 48 hours of the boardroom meeting, and he was off by exactly 12 hours. On the following Tuesday, exactly 10 days after the Christmas party that started this whole mess, I was served with legal papers while having coffee at my favorite downtown cafe. The process server at least had the decency to look apologetic about interrupting my cappuccino. Clara was suing me for emotional manipulation, abuse of power, and my personal favorite, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit was 23 pages long, which seemed excessive for someone whose primary complaint was that I'd exercised my legal rights as a shareholder after she'd publicly humiliated me. I read through it while finishing my coffee, occasionally laughing out loud at particularly dramatic passages that made me sound like a corporate supervillain instead of a guy who'd just defended himself. According to Clara's legal team, and she'd apparently hired a big firm, which meant she was either spending her savings or someone was backing her, I had weaponized my financial position and created a hostile environment designed to punish her for exercising her personal autonomy. Personal autonomy. That's what we were calling publicly announced workplace affairs now. The English language was truly a beautiful, flexible thing. I forwarded the lawsuit to Mark with a single text. She can't be serious. He called me 30 seconds later, laughing so hard I could barely understand him. Oh, she's serious. This is the most desperate Hail Mary I've seen in years. Her lawyers are either incredibly optimistic or incredibly expensive. Can she win? I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew the answer. Win? Gavin. She confessed to the affair on Instagram. There's video evidence of her announcing it at a work party. She violated company ethics policies that are clearly documented in the employee handbook. You followed proper legal procedures for shareholder actions. The only thing you're guilty of is having good lawyers and better timing. He paused. Also, I love that she's claiming emotional distress. The woman who publicly humiliated you is claiming you hurt her feelings by following corporate governance procedures. That's like punching someone and then suing them because your hand hurts. The court date was set for 3 weeks out, which gave me plenty of time to prepare and also plenty of time to watch Clara's legal strategy fall apart in real time. Because here's the thing about filing a lawsuit in the age of social media. Everyone has opinions, and they're all going to share them immediately. Within hours of the lawsuit becoming public record, because of course it became public, nothing in my life was private anymore. The internet had thoughts. So many thoughts. The hashtag Clara versus Gavin started trending, which made our divorce sound like a boxing match or a reality show finale. Honestly, at this point, it might as well have been both. She's suing him for emotional distress? Ma'am, you caused the distress, one tweet said. Imagine cheating, announcing it publicly, getting fired for ethics violations, and then being surprised when there are consequences. I simply cannot relate, another added. My favorite was, this woman really said, how dare you fire me from the company you own after I publicly humiliated you, and expected sympathy. The audacity is almost impressive. Even legal analysts were weighing in, appearing on morning shows to discuss the case, like it was landmark litigation instead of my personal nightmare turned public spectacle. One lawyer on Good Morning America said, this lawsuit has almost no chance of success. Employment law is clear. Shareholders have the right to make personnel decisions, especially when there are documented policy violations. The 3 weeks leading up to the court date were a masterclass in watching someone dig their own grave while insisting they were building a fortress. Clara gave an interview to a local news station where she claimed I'd always been controlling and had used money to manipulate her. The interview would have been more effective if the reporter hadn't immediately followed up with, but didn't he invest in your career? And weren't the shares purchased legally? Clara's response, a flustered, that's not the point, became a meme within hours. Mark and I spent 2 days preparing for court, though honestly, the preparation felt unnecessary. We had documentation for everything. The original investment agreement, the share purchase records, the company ethics policies, the board meeting minutes, and oh yes, the video of Clara announcing her affair at a work party that 4.2 million people had now watched. If this case went to trial, it would be the legal equivalent of shooting fish in a barrel, if the fish had already jumped out of the barrel and flopped around on the deck while filming themselves. The day of the hearing arrived with the kind of crisp winter clarity that made everything feel sharp and well-defined. I wore another one of my power suits, navy this time, because I was feeling patriotic about justice, and met Mark outside the courthouse. There were reporters everywhere, which I'd expected, and a small crowd of people who'd apparently taken time off work to watch my divorce proceedings like they were a sporting event. Mr. Miles, do you have any comment? A reporter shouted. Justice speaks for itself, I said, which sounded good and gave them a quote without actually saying anything meaningful. Inside, the courtroom was exactly what you'd expect, wood paneling, uncomfortable benches, and that particular smell of old documents and broken dreams. Clara was already there with her legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits who looked like they were mentally calculating how much they could bill for this disaster. She didn't look at me when I walked in, which was fine. I wasn't particularly interested in making eye contact with her either. Judge Harriet Doyle entered, and everyone stood. She was in her early 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and glasses that suggested she'd seen every variation of human stupidity and wasn't impressed by any of it. I liked her immediately. The proceedings were surprisingly quick. Clara's lawyers presented their case, arguing that I'd used my position of power to retaliate against her for ending our marriage. They made me sound like a Bond villain, which would have been flattering if it wasn't so ridiculous. Then Mark stood up, and I watched him do what he did best, demolish arguments with facts and documentation. He walked the judge through the timeline, the original investment, the subsequent share purchases, the company ethics policies, the board meeting procedures. He showed the Instagram post where Clara announced the affair. He played a clip from the Christmas party video. Judge Doyle watched everything with an expression that suggested she was rapidly losing patience with Clara's legal team. When Mark finished, she looked at Clara's lead attorney and said, "Counselor, do you have any evidence that Mr. Miles acted outside his legal rights as a shareholder?" Your Honor, the emotional context. I asked about legal rights, not emotional context. Did Mr. Miles violate any laws or regulations in his actions as a shareholder? No, Your Honor, but did your client violate company ethics policies by engaging in a relationship with a subordinate and announcing it at a company function? There was a long pause. Technically, yes, but and is there documented evidence of this violation, including your client's own social media posts and video footage? Another pause. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Doyle removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose like she was physically tired of this case. Ma'am, she said, looking directly at Clara. Your husband. Excuse me, your soon-to-be ex-husband. Legally owned the company where you worked. You engaged in behavior that violated company policy, which you admitted to publicly, including on social media. He followed proper procedures to address those violations. I don't see a case here. I see consequences for your actions, which is not the same thing as emotional manipulation. She banged her gavel. Case dismissed. Next time, maybe don't confess to ethics violations on Instagram. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Clara's face went from pale to red, and one of her lawyers looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Mark was grinning so wide I thought his face might split in half. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us immediately. I stopped on the steps, feeling generous and also slightly vindictive, and decided to give them what they wanted. I love when justice comes with a receipt, I said, and Mark nearly choked trying not to laugh. The quote was on Twitter before we'd even reached the parking lot. Within an hour, I was trending again. Hashtag Justice with Receipts competing with hashtag Silent Savage Husband for top hashtag honors. Someone had already made t-shirts. As I drove home, my phone buzzing with congratulatory texts from people I'd forgotten existed, I realized something. This whole mess, the affair, the humiliation, the lawsuit, had been Clara's attempt to rewrite our story with her as the hero finally breaking free. Instead, she'd written herself as the cautionary tale, and me as the guy who proved that sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the natural consequences of their own terrible decisions. Also, good lawyers. Good lawyers help too. By the time February rolled around, I'd achieved a level of fame I never asked for and definitely didn't deserve. I wasn't movie star famous or even reality TV famous. I was internet famous, which is simultaneously more and less significant than regular fame. It meant I couldn't go to Starbucks without someone recognizing me, but also that I'd probably be completely forgotten in 6 months when the internet found a new protagonist to obsess over. The memes were relentless. Someone had photoshopped my face onto everything from historical paintings to movie posters. There was one where I was Napoleon crossing the Alps, except instead of a horse, I was riding a giant share certificate. Another showed me as the "This is fine" dog sitting in a burning room, except the room was labeled my marriage, and I was holding a document labeled 52% ownership. The internet's creativity was both impressive and deeply weird. But the weirdest part wasn't the memes or the viral videos or even the 3 podcast interviews I'd politely declined. The weirdest part was how it affected my regular life. People treated me differently now, like I was some kind of folk hero instead of just a guy who'd protected his assets after getting publicly humiliated. Case in point, my barber gave me a discount. I walked into the same barbershop I'd been going to for 5 years, and Tony, who'd been cutting my hair since I moved to Nashville, refused to charge me full price. Nah, man, he said, waving away my credit card. Consider it the revenge haircut. On the house. Well, half on the house. $20 instead of 40. Tony, you don't have to. I saw the video, Gav. We all saw the video. What you did. That was legendary. The way you just smiled and walked out. Cold. Then coming back with the ownership papers. Ice cold. You deserve a discount just for style points. So apparently I was now getting discounted services for publicly dismantling my wife's career. The world was a strange place, and I was just living in it. The real test of my newfound fame came when I went to the grocery store on a random Tuesday afternoon. I was in the cereal aisle, because yes, I'm 41 and still eat Lucky Charms, sue me, when a woman in her 30s approached me with her phone out. Excuse me, are you Gavin Miles? I considered lying, but at this point, what was the point? Yeah, that's me. Her face lit up like I'd just told her she'd won the lottery. Oh my God, I have to tell you, what you did was amazing. My ex cheated on me 3 years ago, and I wish I'd had your level of preparation. Can I get a photo? So I took a photo with a stranger in the cereal aisle, both of us holding boxes of cereal and smiling like we were old friends instead of two people who'd met 30 seconds ago bonding over infidelity and corporate revenge. She posted it immediately with the caption, "Met the legend himself. Hashtag silent savage husband, hashtag king behavior." This became a pattern. I couldn't go anywhere without someone recognizing me, wanting to share their own cheating ex story, or asking for advice on protecting their assets. I became an accidental expert on prenups and investment strategies, which was hilarious because 6 weeks ago, I'd been a regular guy who thought his marriage was solid. The media attention eventually died down, as media attention always does, but I'd become a permanent fixture in certain corners of the internet. There were Reddit threads analyzing my strategy, TikTok accounts dedicated to relationship revenge stories that always referenced mine as the gold standard, and at least 4 different YouTube video essays with titles like The Psychology of Strategic Revenge, a case study, that used my situation as the primary example. Meanwhile, Clara had basically vanished from public life. Her social media accounts were still private, and according to mutual friends who apparently had no sense of loyalty or discretion, she'd moved in with her parents in the suburbs. The woman who'd been VP of brand development at a luxury fashion company was now living in her childhood bedroom, which felt like the kind of poetic justice you couldn't write without being accused of being too heavy-handed. But the really satisfying part came about 6 weeks after the court case, when Clara tried to do a tell-all interview. Some local lifestyle magazine had apparently decided that her side of the story would make good content, probably hoping to generate some of that sweet controversy traffic. The interview was scheduled, promoted, and according to the internet gossip mill, Clara had spent hours preparing her talking points about emotional abuse and financial manipulation. The interview aired on their YouTube channel on a Thursday evening, and I watched it with Mark and a bottle of wine that cost more than it should have, but felt appropriate for the occasion. Clara looked tired but determined, sitting in some tastefully decorated studio with soft lighting that was clearly meant to make her look sympathetic. The host, a woman named Rebecca who did that particular brand of empathetic journalism where every question sounds like therapy, started with softball questions. "Tell us about what happened in your marriage." Clara launched into her prepared speech about how she'd felt suffocated and controlled, and how finding Eli had been about rediscovering herself. It was the same narrative she'd been pushing since the beginning, and it might have worked if Rebecca had stopped there. But then Rebecca did something beautiful. She played a clip from the Christmas party video, the full clip, including Clara laughing at her own announcement and the room's reaction to my humiliation. "Clara," Rebecca said, her voice still empathetic, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "In this video, you're laughing. The room is laughing. Your husband is standing there being publicly humiliated, and you're smiling. How do you reconcile that with your narrative about being the victim?" Clara's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, defensiveness, before settling on something that looked like she'd just realized she'd walked into a trap. That was taken out of context." "What context?" Rebecca asked. "This is the full 2-minute clip." The interview went downhill from there. Rebecca asked about the Instagram post, about the ethics violations, about why Clara thought it was appropriate to announce an affair at a work party. Every answer Clara gave made her sound worse, more defensive, less sympathetic. By the end, even the lighting couldn't save her. The comments section was brutal. "She really thought this would help her case, LMAO," was one of the top comments. Another said, "The interviewer AT her up. This is what real journalism looks like." My personal favorite was, "She walked into this interview like it was a chance to tell her story and walked out having just proved his point." Mark paused the video and raised his wine glass. To Clara, who just did more damage to her own reputation in 30 minutes than we could have done in a year. To Clara, I agreed, clinking glasses. May she continue to be her own worst enemy. Public sympathy, which had been marginally on her side in some circles, mostly people who believed in supporting women without actually examining what they were supporting, evaporated faster than my respect for her judgment. The narrative shifted completely. I was no longer the vengeful ex-husband with too much power. I was the guy who'd been publicly humiliated and had responded with restraint and legal action instead of actual revenge. Even my own family, who'd been suspiciously quiet during the initial drama, started reaching out. My mom called to tell me she'd always had concerns about Clara, which was news to me since she'd seemed perfectly fine with her at our wedding. My sister sent a text that just said, "I told you she was sketchy," even though she definitely had not told me that. Everyone suddenly had opinions they'd been holding back, now feeling safe to share them since public opinion had firmly landed on my side. The weirdest message came from Eli. Yes, that Eli. He sent an email to my personal account, which meant he'd kept it from when we'd exchanged information for work events years ago, with the subject line, "I'm sorry." The email was 3 paragraphs of rambling apologies about getting caught up and not meaning for things to go this far, and hoping we could move past this. He didn't mention the smoothie bar job, but the desperation in his tone suggested things weren't going well in his new career path. I deleted it without responding. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. They're better off as wreckage that serves as a warning to others. As winter turned to spring, life started feeling normal again, or at least a new version of normal where I occasionally got recognized at restaurants and had a Wikipedia page that someone had created without my permission. The internet had mostly moved on to new dramas, new viral moments, new protagonists in the endless soap opera of human behavior. But I remained a cautionary tale, a legend, a meme. The guy who'd smiled and walked out of his own humiliation only to return with paperwork and perfect timing. And honestly, I was okay with that. 6 months after the Christmas party that launched 1,000 memes, Arden and company posted record profits. Not just good profits or decent profits, but the kind of numbers that made financial analysts send congratulatory emails and investors suddenly remember they'd always believed in the company's potential. The quarterly report showed a 47% increase in revenue, a 32% jump in online sales, and brand recognition that had tripled since December. Turns out, viral drama was better than any marketing campaign money could buy. Who knew that publicly firing your cheating wife would make people want to buy overpriced handbags? Capitalism worked in mysterious and occasionally hilarious ways. Tara had officially been promoted to CEO after a board vote that was so unanimous it was almost boring. She'd earned it, not just by holding the company together during the chaos, but by actually improving operations, streamlining processes, and turning potential disaster into demonstrable success. I stayed on as chairman of the board, which meant I got to make big-picture decisions without dealing with daily operations, which was exactly the level of involvement I wanted. We were in Tara's new office, formerly Clara's office, though all traces of her had been removed and replaced with Tara's more practical aesthetic, reviewing the quarterly numbers when my phone buzzed with an email notification. I glanced at it and actually laughed out loud. "What?" Tara asked, looking up from her laptop. "Clara just sent me an email," I said, staring at my phone like it had suddenly grown a second screen. Subject line, "Can we talk?" Tara raised an eyebrow. "Is this the first time she's contacted you since the lawsuit?" "Yep." 6 months of silence, and now she wants to talk. I'm almost impressed by the timing. We just posted record profits. The story's finally died down, and suddenly she remembers I exist. Are you going to respond? I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Absolutely. I opened my email and typed out a response that felt both professional and perfectly petty. "For any inquiries, please contact our customer service team at support@ardenko.com. Response time is typically 3 to 5 business days. Thank you for your patience." I hit send and showed Tara, who laughed so hard she had to set down her coffee to avoid spilling it. "That's cold. I love it." "I'm not being cold," I said innocently. "I'm being professional." She wanted to be treated like everyone else when she announced her affair at a work party. Now she gets treated like everyone else, like a customer with a complaint. The rest of the day continued in that vein of satisfying normalcy. We discussed expansion plans, reviewed marketing strategies, and debated whether to open a second retail location in Memphis. It was boring, professional work, and after 6 months of drama, boring felt luxurious. I was finally just a guy doing business instead of a guy whose business had become public entertainment. That evening, Mark came over to celebrate. We'd made it a tradition over the past few months. Whenever something particularly ridiculous happened in the ongoing saga of my life, we'd get together with expensive alcohol and toast to the absurdity of it all. Tonight's occasion was the quarterly report and Clara's pathetic email, both of which deserved recognition. "To record profits," Mark said, raising his glass of champagne that cost more than some people's car payments. To record profits, I echoed, and to emotional damage being paid in dividends. We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Genuine contentment. Not happiness exactly. That felt like too strong a word for a situation that had started with public humiliation, but something close to peace. Like I'd finally turned a corner and could see the road ahead instead of just the wreckage behind me. You know what's funny? Mark said, settling into one of my leather chairs with Whiskers immediately claiming his lap. 6 months ago, you were the guy whose wife announced an affair at a Christmas party. Now you're the guy who turned a personal disaster into a business success story. That's not just revenge, that's legacy. I don't know about legacy, I said. I'm still mostly known for a viral video and a really good lawyer. Hey, I was excellent in that courtroom, Mark said. But don't sell yourself short. You played this perfectly. You could have made a scene at the party, didn't? You could have badmouthed Clara on social media, didn't? You could have used your ownership to be actually vindictive instead of just enforcing workplace policies, didn't? You took the high road, and the high road happened to have better views and bigger profits. He wasn't wrong. I'd been angry, sure. Hurt, absolutely. But I'd channeled all of that into doing things the right way. Legal, professional, by the book. And somehow, that had been more effective than any dramatic revenge plot could have been. What do you think Clara's doing right now? Mark asked, scratching Whiskers behind the ears while she purred like a small engine. According to the last update I got from mutual friends with questionable loyalty, she's teaching yoga. Mark nearly spit out his champagne. She's what? Teaching yoga. Apparently, she's on some kind of journey to rediscover herself and find inner peace. Which is code for I destroyed my career and now I'm trying to rebrand as spiritually enlightened. Does she even like yoga? She used to complain about it constantly. Said it was boring and made her knees hurt. But I guess when you tank your professional reputation, you take what jobs you can get. We both sat there for a moment, contemplating the irony of Clara, former VP of a luxury fashion company, woman who'd announced her affair with confidence and flair, now teaching downward dog to suburban moms in a strip mall studio. The universe had a sense of humor, and apparently, it was a fan of poetic justice. I hope she finds what she's looking for, Mark said, and he sounded almost sincere. Really? I asked. You hope she finds inner peace? Sure, he said. Preferably far, far away from you and anything you own or operate. I'm magnanimous like that. My phone buzzed again. Another email from Clara. I opened it and read, Please, Gavin. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. I owe you an explanation. I showed it to Mark, who rolled his eyes. What are you going to say? Nothing, I said, deleting the email. She had 7 years to talk to me. She had multiple opportunities to have honest conversations about our marriage. Instead, she chose to have an affair and announce it at a work party. I don't owe her closure, and I definitely don't need her explanation. Closure is overrated anyway, Mark agreed. You know what's better than closure? Quarterly reports showing 47% revenue growth. You know what's even better? I said, pulling up something on my phone. This. I showed him a news article from that afternoon, former Arden and Company. Executive launches wellness brand. The article featured a photo of Clara in yoga clothes, sitting in lotus position, with a caption about her new business teaching authentic living and finding your truth. Mark read it and started laughing. She's monetizing the aftermath of her own scandal. That's actually kind of brilliant in a deeply shameless way. It won't work, I said confidently. Her brand is built on being authentic after leaving a controlling marriage. But everyone's seen the videos. Everyone knows what actually happened. You can't rebrand yourself as a victim when there's literal footage of you being the villain. Still, Mark said, you've got to admire the audacity. Most people would have moved to a different state and changed their names. She's trying to build a business out of her infamy. And it'll fail, I said. Not because I'm vindictive, but because the market for wellness advice from people who announce affairs at work parties is probably pretty limited. We raised our glasses again, this time to the beautiful, messy, occasionally ridiculous nature of consequences. To the fact that sometimes good guys don't finish last. They just finish with better lawyers, bigger bank accounts, and the satisfaction of knowing they did everything right even when everything felt wrong. You ever going to date again? Mark asked as we were finishing the bottle. Eventually, I said. When I meet someone who doesn't think workplace affairs are suitable party announcements. That's a pretty low bar. After Clara, I'm comfortable with low bars. At least for now. Whiskers meowed in agreement, or possibly hunger, and I realized something. I was genuinely okay. Not just surviving or coping or getting through it, but actually okay. Clara had tried to destroy me publicly, and instead she'd freed me from a marriage I hadn't realized was already over. She'd given me back control of my life, my career, and my future. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well, posting good numbers, and watching your ex try to teach yoga to people who definitely recognize her from viral videos. Closure was overrated. Quarterly reports were forever. Hashtag Chapter 10, peace, profits, and perfect timing. 9 months after the Christmas party that changed everything, I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse apartment, watching Nashville's city lights flicker like applause stretched across the horizon. The apartment was objectively too big for one man and a cat, but after everything that had happened, I decided I deserved some unnecessary luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen I barely used, and a view that made every overpriced dollar worth it. Whiskers was inside, probably destroying something expensive, but I'd learned to pick my battles. She'd been with me through the worst of it, and if she wanted to sharpen her claws on furniture that cost more than my first car, she'd earned that right. The city looked different from up here. Cleaner, more organized, like someone had arranged all the chaos into neat little rows of light. From this height, you couldn't see the mess, the traffic jams, the arguments, the people making terrible decisions in real time. You just saw the glow, the potential, the promise that tomorrow might be better than today. Clara had completely vanished from Nashville's corporate circles, which was probably for the best. According to the internet, because the internet never fully forgets anyone, she was still teaching yoga somewhere in the suburbs, still trying to build her wellness brand on the foundation of her own scandal. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that her classes were sparsely attended, mostly by people who didn't recognize her or didn't care about her past. The authenticity she'd been chasing had turned out to be remarkably unmarketable. I didn't feel bad for her. I didn't feel vindictive either. Mostly, I just felt distant. Like she was a character from a movie I'd watched years ago, barely remembered now except for the general plot. She'd been my wife, my partner, the person I'd thought I'd grow old with. Now she was just someone who'd made a series of catastrophically poor decisions and had to live with the consequences. Eli had apparently left Nashville entirely. Someone told me he'd moved to Portland or Seattle or one of those Pacific Northwest cities where people reinvent themselves and pretend their past doesn't exist. Good for him. I hoped he was happy blending smoothies or writing manifestos or whatever it is that disgraced marketing managers do when they need a fresh start. As for me, I'd built something that looked suspiciously like success from the rubble of my marriage. Miles Holdings was now a reality, a consulting and investment firm that specialized in helping businesses scale sustainably. I'd acquired 2 more fashion startups in the past 6 months, both showing promising growth. The architect who'd become a consultant had now become an entrepreneur, and honestly, it suited me better than I'd expected. The best part, the part that made me smile every time I thought about it, was the mentorship fund. I'd established it 3 months ago with Mark's help, a program that provided financial literacy resources and legal consultation for people going through divorces, especially those who'd been blindsided by infidelity. It was petty in the best possible way, taking my personal disaster and turning it into something that helped other people avoid similar catastrophes. The fund was called the Strategic Futures Initiative because the revenge fund for people who got screwed over by cheaters didn't have the same professional ring to it. We'd already helped 43 people protect their assets, understand their rights, and navigate divorces with better preparation than I'd had. Every success story felt like another small victory, another reminder that sometimes the best way to heal is to make sure others don't hurt the same way. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Also, you're trending again. Something about inspirational quotes. Check Twitter. I opened Twitter, my public account now, because I'd finally accepted that privacy was a relic of my past life, and saw what he meant. Someone had made one of those inspirational quote graphics using something I'd apparently said in an interview I'd forgotten about. The image showed my face looking thoughtful, with text overlaid that read, They laughed when she called me just an appearance. Turns out, I was the whole show. Gavin Miles. It had 89,000 retweets and counting. The comments were predictably mixed. People calling it inspirational, people calling it petty, people debating whether it was healthy to quote yourself, and people just enjoying the ongoing saga of my life like it was their favorite TV show. I texted Mark back. I sound like a fortune cookie wrote my biography. A fortune cookie with excellent lawyers, he replied. See you tomorrow. I pocketed my phone and looked back out at the city. Somewhere out there, Clara was probably teaching a yoga class, trying to help people find their center while still searching for her own. Somewhere out there, Eli was probably regretting every decision that had led him to a viral video and a ruined career. And somewhere out there, 50 people who'd laughed at my humiliation were probably telling the story of the Christmas party. Except now they were the cautionary tale, and I was the punchline that actually landed. The irony wasn't lost on me. 9 months ago, I'd been the joke, the husband who got publicly humiliated at a holiday party, the guy everyone pitted or laughed at depending on their capacity for empathy. Now I was the success story, the example, the guy who turned personal disaster into professional triumph. It wasn't the story I would have chosen to live, but it was the story I'd been given, and I'd made damn sure it had a good ending. Inside, Whiskers meowed, probably demanding dinner or attention or just reminding me that cats don't care about redemption arcs. I went back in, poured her food, and made myself a drink. Whiskey, the good stuff. Because I could afford the good stuff now, and that felt important somehow. My apartment was quiet except for the sound of Whiskers eating and the distant hum of the city below. No drama, no chaos, no surprise announcements at work parties. Just peace, the kind that comes from knowing you survived something that should have destroyed you and came out stronger on the other side. I thought about that night sometimes, standing in that trendy loft with my champagne, watching my marriage end in real time while strangers laughed. I thought about how small I'd felt, how humiliated, how certain that this was the worst moment of my life. And it had been, technically. It was the moment everything I thought I knew about my life turned out to be wrong. But it was also the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped being passive and started being strategic. The moment I remembered that I wasn't just someone's husband or someone's embarrassment. I was Gavin Miles, and I'd built things before and could build them again. 3 days after that party, the people who'd laughed lost their jobs. The woman who'd mocked me lost everything she'd taken for granted. And the man who'd smiled and walked out came back with documentation, preparation, and the kind of patience that only comes from knowing exactly how the story ends. I raised my glass to the city, to the journey, to the beautiful disaster that had somehow become my greatest success. They laughed when she called me just an appearance. I said out loud, feeling only slightly ridiculous talking to myself in an empty apartment. Turns out, I was the whole show. Whiskers looked at me like I was being dramatic, which was fair, but she also rubbed against my leg, which I chose to interpret as support. The city lights flickered on below me, thousands of stories unfolding simultaneously. Romances beginning, marriages ending, careers launching, dreams crashing. Somewhere in all that chaos, my story had become part of the landscape, a cautionary tale about karma, consequences, and the importance of reading investment contracts carefully. I finished my drink, scratched Whiskers behind the ears, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Genuinely excited about tomorrow. Not because I had revenge to plan or battles to fight, but because I had things to build, people to help, and a life that was finally, completely mine. The show wasn't over. It was just getting started, and this time, I was writing the script.